if she introduces herself, she'll be too modest. Mel, I'm going to try not to cry. I've known Mel for 20 years. She's one of my best friends. She is probably the bravest person I know. She's not afraid
I agree.
Do you agree? Okay. How many of you know Mel personally? Yeah, it's Mel, and the thing I like about her as a friend is that we have deep discussions. She's not afraid to tell me when she disagrees with me, but she also listens really, really carefully, and I hope I do the same. She was a professor at USF, is that right, Mel, when I first met her, but she dropped that job, that career calling, to stand up for persecuted people here in the United States, especially, and I say persecuted, specifically many of our friends who were pro-Palestinian, and they still continue to languish, be tortured in prisons today, 20 years later. And it's because we see this happening again that I think it's really important to have Mel's voice included here today. She, many of you are on her mailing list. She's tireless. And with that, Mel, if I got anything wrong or missed anything, and she encourages you to ask questions if there's anything you'd like to hear about her or about the issues. Thank you. You're welcome.
So Lois, thank you for that really nice and accessible
That
introduction. Anyway, so currently, so I'm Mel, and currently I'm the director, or executive director of the Coalition for Civil Freedoms, which is CCF, and a lot of you maybe remember it as a National Coalition to Protect Civil Freedoms. But I wrote things down, otherwise I won't stay short and I'll forget things, so sorry if I repeat you. But CCF's mission is to defend civil liberties and freedoms, promote a fair U.S. criminal justice system, and advocate for the rights of political prisoners targeted in the war on terror. So we already heard about Samuel Arian. He was a supporter of Palestinian and a big supporter of Palestinian rights and very effective at talking to legislators and politicians. So he's like a threat, and so when you silence him and charge him with terrorism, the jury, basically acquitted him of terrorism, but he still spent 11 years. Over 5 years in prison, mostly solitary confinement, and then another 5 years in house arrest. But he is currently finally got deported to Istanbul, and he is not silent. You may hear him all the time. He's, if you're on any of the social media or anywhere, he's getting all over the world now. CCF advocates for prisoners who have been unjustly targeted under the anti-terrorism laws, like Sammy. And these laws have targeted Palestinians basically since the beginning. The Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act of 1996 allowed the Secretary of State to designate any organization they wanted to as foreign terrorist organization, which providing material support, as they call it, to one of them is a crime that can put you away for life. And what constitutes this support is very vague, that can include speech and does include speech, and even speech that encourages a group to avoid violence could still get you charged with that. So initially, 30% of the initial designations were Palestinian groups such as Hamas. So the prisoners that we advocate for haven't committed any crime, but they were entrapped by FBI informants who befriend them, sometimes for years, record things they say. And the comments are selectively played to a jury, and they get convictions that lead to incredibly long sentences. And one example of this is the Duca brothers. These were three brothers who were entrapped by the FBI and accused of plotting to attack Fort Dix. You might remember that from the news. This was not that long after 9/11, and it was easy to get convictions then. So the informant who testified at this trial said that these brothers knew nothing about any plot, but they still got convicted and sentenced to life in prison. And that's where they are today. And a very short summary of what CCF does. We really do a lot of things, including education, like we do, speak at other events and that kind of thing. We provide monthly support to indigent prisoners who have no outside help. And we provide some support to the families of political prisoners. It's also very hard on them. And then one important project we're doing right now is filing motions for compassionate release of prisoners. And we have succeeded in getting the release of 6 prisoners. In one case, it was a young kid who was entrapped. It took a decade off of his sentence. So it's a great project. I'm really proud of it. And apparently motions are being prepared for the Duca brothers. And there's also many prisoners to go, but it's very time consuming and there's a lot of expenses involved. And so if you'd like to donate, we will be happily take any money you would like to give to help release these prisoners. Like I was trying to keep it like really short, but Lois told me to be short, so I did. And
One thing I have to say,
do you have any questions?
we can't do any donations here in this room,
Yeah,
but we can do them online, outside,
Yeah.
etc.
So I got a QR code over there, and then, I thought I have brochures here. And I've got these 2 books here. This Inventing Terrorists was written by our legal team. And it's sort of kind of like our Bibles, kind of what we do is in here, what our basis is. And then the Terror Trap is a bunch of like scholars from all over the world contributed to this. And they're both available for like, again, a donation, but we can't do it here. But just to know that I have them. And now, if anybody has any questions, I would happily answer them.
Mel, could you tell a little bit more about Sammy's case? I think people might be interested in hearing that.
Sammy?
About
Okay,
Sammy's
say
case.
Sammy, the kid was also named Sammy. That's
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
His case.
Yeah, he was, he got a lot of attention there because he was, he was going to Washington all the time, meeting with presidents. I mean, he was very well known there. They were accomplishing things. And so then basically, it's sort of Israel actually went after him, is how I see it. They wanted to silence him, basically. And so he spent, he was a tenured professor at USF. I mean, to charge him with terrorism was ludicrous. And he spent about 2.5 years in prison before he had a trial. And that was pretty much solitary confinement, those 2.5 years. And it was in Coleman, Florida, which is quite a ways from Tampa. So it's very difficult for the lawyer to meet with him. It's difficult for his family to visit him. There's all kinds of obstacles to him preparing the case. And then we went to the trial. Some of us here, Lois and I were there a lot. And I was there every day, at least part of the time. And it was just ludicrous. It was like they had no evidence, and one of the jurors afterwards, when they were acquitted of terrorism, he was asked what would it take to convict him, and he said evidence. And it said, 6 months of a trial, there was no evidence at all that he had done anything. But they still managed to keep him in prison for 5.5 years and another 5 years house arrest. But he's in Istanbul now, and he's at a university. He's at a university there. He's holding all kinds of events, and he's getting interviewed by people all over the world, including here. So I'm really happy. I'm really happy he did not get silenced, because he'd be a hard one to silence. And he was also the founder of Coalition for Civil Freedoms. I need to mention that for sure. He thought it up in his prison cell. So.
And this is a fund for legal representation, so that they can keep fighting for people who are unjustly imprisoned.
The one I'm begging for, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and we have a wonderful lawyer. I mean, she hardly reports any of her hours, and when she does, she's just paid $50 an hour. And she was doing it pro bono forever, but if she could get more help, there's still all kinds of expenses. And when we get other people to do, like we just hired a lawyer to do some research to get the Somali kids out of Minneapolis, to get them. 3 of them got really long sentences. One got a 35-year sentence. And if you're familiar with that case or not, there were 9 of them, and most of them were allowed to do plea deals, so they're out already. They spent 10 years. And the one guy, there's 3 of them actually, but one in particular, they would not let him do a plea deal, and he got 35 years, and it was the same evidence for basically all of them.
Wow.
So he's working on right now, him and his 2 of the co-defendants. And there's a lot of expenses. We had to hire a lawyer to do some research, and she didn't work for $50. So that's one case. And filing the motions is expensive, you know, you have to pay for all of this stuff, so, yeah.
I understand with Samuel Arias' case, he was actually found not guilty several times, or charges were dismissed, and they just kept bringing new charge after
He
new charge.
got, all the terrorism, all of the jurors agreed that he was not a terrorist, and I think there were two that didn't want to let him go completely. And so I think, what do they call them, his actual acts, if you read the entire, his entire plea deal, what he did, one of his acts was lying to a top of A Times reporter, St. Pete Times at the time.
I think
The
that was
reporter
close.
said he didn't tell me any lies, you know. The other one was helping his brother-in-law with his legal expenses. So these things were not crimes, the things that are in there, but he still. And I think, you know, back then, everybody was so afraid because of 9/11 that you could just get these horrendous sentences, you know, as many people, and a lot of people getting life in prison. And many of them are Palestinian, which is sort of why I'm here, I guess. So,
One other factor too in that case was financial, just the sheer expense of retrying the case.
yeah,
I mean, it took millions, I think, somewhere around $5 million
Yeah.
in the first round. That's how much money that it took to get there. And then the government was threatening to retry the case.
mhm,
Wow.
So,
yeah. And then the judge, if Judge Brinkema is someone, I think she's kind of, you know, they're under a lot of pressure to do what the government wants, but she just kept, we went up to hearings, how many times? Oh, 5 times?
A
We went
lot
up
of
to-
times it seems.
Yeah, Washington DC, because there's this evil guy whose name is.
I forgot his name, thank
The
goodness.
prosecutor that's very Zionist. Kronberg,
Mhm.
yeah, so he was really going after Sammy, and we'd go up there 5 times, and you know, Sammy had his evidence about the plea deal. The judge kept telling Kronberg, well, go bring your evidence, and he'd come back the next time without any evidence. She finally just let it linger, and then she dropped it. Just dropped the case against him, so.
What I thought was interesting was, even though they said he was a terrorist, for the last year or two, he was allowed to walk through, was it Alexandria? He was outside of DC. You know,
Yeah.
a terrorist, you know, they said, oh, just leave your ankle bracelet on, but
Yeah.
you can go for walks, you can, you know, whatever.
Yeah,
I
actually,
mean,
all the,
There was no fear of him as somebody who would ever hurt anybody.
no.
They were afraid of his speaking out. It reminds me so much of what's going on today with ICE, you know, just indiscriminately picking people up for, you know, with a big net and not using due process. I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Good news on Mahmoud Khalid, is that how it's pronounced?
Khalid.
Thank you. Being released just yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not totally awesome.
Oh, 3 months in jail for no reason, yeah.
No reason at all. Yeah,
Finally out.
yeah. So it's good, we need more people here standing up to them.
Well, we'll get a snowball.
Thanks to all of you out here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions? Turn it over to other people.
He's a very interesting speaker. I've seen some videos that he's done. He's very intelligent. He's
Oh,
very well spoken. Sammy Arians.
Oh, Sammy, yeah.
Yeah.
Very, his
And,
son, Abdullah, also gets yeah, so if you can Google Sammy, you'll find hours and hours and hours of
Yes, lots of YouTube.
It's good. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Mel.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And this stuff will remain here.